Hi guys, Rubadiri Victor here, President of the Artists Coalition of Trinidad and Tobago in Woodford Square, Port of Spain, capital of Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. And we're here for the exhibition Pantheon 1, the Kings and Queens, the King and Queen costumes of Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival. And this is being put on. Here's Woodford Square's heritage information. Woodford Square is a square that's kind of at the heart of Trinidad and Tobago's many facets of its history. This is a point where there were the native peoples, the Warao, Kalinago peoples, the first peoples had massive conurbations, and also a place where there was ritual at this spot. A river used to run through here. When the colonials came, this was a site of great battles and resistance by the natives. There is actually the Red House is right across the way. We'll see it in a little bit. It's built upon native burial ground, right? That's the seat of Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Is built on native burial ground. There was a interment ceremony that was conducted recently by elders of the First People Nation to put those spirits to rest properly and to inter the bones properly. This site has also been a site of successive waves of resistance. The burning of the Red House with the water riots in the early part of the 20th century. It's been a place where Black Power riots and speeches were made, speeches for the independence of the country, grand debates between the first Prime Minister and his rivals. It's been a space where when there is resistance and marches and those kinds of things, this is where people come to do that work. It's also major trade union movement marches and that kind of stuff, artist marches, where we planned the first quota march in Trinidad and Tobago, where we marched 400 plus around the Red House and around the streets by the AG's office and through the streets of Port of Spain, asking for 50% local content quotas for broadcast media, film, TV, and radio. Those are the kinds of things that happen here. And also, this was a site where enslaved Africans were hanged and murdered by colonial authorities. Yeah, so that's the history of Woodford Square. It's a space of contention, and it is a space where the sovereign powers of resistance come to battle for and behalf of the progressive forces and the liberation forces of the country against oppressive forces. This was the site that we chose to do this exhibition, Pantheon 1, right? So it's one, the first of many, Pantheon being the full sum, a collection of gods and goddesses from one belief system, the full kingdom of God powers residing over one community. We are saying that the King and Queen costumes of Trinidad and Tobago Carnival constitute a ring of godheads that have been invoked by the great band leaders, great designers, great artisans of the last 100 years in Trinidad and Tobago. Most of those costumes have been destroyed because there's no storage and because of a whole set of other reasons. But we are calling for the reconstitution of the 100 greatest costumes of all time, and also the creation of the Carnival and Steel Band Museum, accompanied by a national heritage warehouse where our cultural artifacts can be stored properly. So I'm going to walk you now through the exhibition. So we're just going to pan around Woodford Square so you could get a sense of yourself where you are. Capital city, Port of Spain. That's the first public library in the distance, the Hall of Fame next to it, City Hall. There's Frederick Street, which runs through the heart of Port of Spain. Knox Street, and that's the Anglican Cathedral right there, bordering, and further to its right from where I'm standing is the National Library. right? And we'll see a lot more of those buildings as we go by. But here we are. This is the first part of the exhibition. This is panel 1. So the exhibition is made up of 11 panels telling the history and talking and investigating the king and queen tradition, and 12 portals, which we'll deal with later. So this first panel talks about the phenomena of the kings and queens. So the kings and queens are the crown spectacles of Trinidad and Tobago Carnival artisanry. They lead bands of costume individuals as monarchs across stages and through the streets. They are the culmination of the imaginative, decorative, and engineering arts of the island. When done right, there's nothing else like them on planet Earth. They are the costumed human body extended to monumental statement, right? And the kings and queen extend the belief at the heart of the Trinbagonian carnival that the human body, through dance, gesture, costume, and theatre, has a capacity to say everything and anything, right? So that's the thesis of the exhibition. Costumes come and dance between 11 and 4 in the square, so you all are welcome to come. The public is welcome. Yeah, that's just talking to the public that's there, letting them know what's about to happen. And here we have some images of some of the great costumes of the past, right? You can see from that collection the different, the different styles of costuming and the different kinds of kings and queens, all very, very, very different from one another. You go down, you could see some more. They're all different kinds. And we talk about the phenomena of the kings and queens, gods, goddesses, demons, dragons, kings, priestesses, volcanoes, undersea life, insects, animals, all kinds of things portrayed, historical battles, all those kinds of things portrayed by the king and queens of Carnival. And so that first panel talks about that. But in the second panel, we say that the kings and queens, to understand the kings and queens, you have to understand the magic infinite island of Trinidad and Tobago. And this panel here talks about the infinite island of Trinidad and Tobago. And it talks about a small twin island republic of just 1.3 million people. You hear the bells? Those bells, the Anglican Cathedral is known for its creative musical bells. Every half hour and then every on the hour. Trinidad and Tobago, Twin Island Republic, just 1.3 people and a dot on the world map, yet it has produced more than 150 world records, more than 50 world titles, a panorama of human firsts, a bevy of world geniuses in letters, sports, science, and the arts, and international awards like Oscars, Grammys, Emmys, Tonys, Nobel Prizes, Commonwealth Prizes, all, and we talk about that, the 300 Trinidad-style carnivals. And you say that there's one New Orleans carnival, one Brazilian carnival, 300 plus Trinidad-style carnivals, and we try to start to investigate the reason why this is so. And we talk about the 5 tribes coming here, the 5 festival tribes from all the races of the world coming here to live, and each kind of hearing and seeing a kindred in one another and coming together and creating this phenomenal thing. But at the heart of it, of course, is the African verb, the African community with its impulses towards freedom, inclusivity, spirituality, and those kinds of things, which are lodged at the heart of the carnival and has made all these things possible. A series of golden ages, of course, across the African diaspora, across the world. You had pan mass calypso here, but you had hip hop, blues, pop, jazz, rock, R&B, funk, all of those things in America, samba in Brazil, son and salsa and mambo in Cuba, salsa, the pan-Caribbean salsa, reggae, ska, rocksteady, dancehall in Jamaica. You have all those things coming from the African diaspora, the power of the African diaspora in the 20th century, creating these things, and pan, mass, and calypso, and the king and queens being part of that. And now we talk about the distortion of the tradition that has happened over the last couple decades, the last 4 or 5 decades, by the judges of the carnival, and how they have thwarted the will of the people and the power of the costumes by breaking the ritual connection of the people with the costumes and what the costumes meant to the community. So we see here when the 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 we talk about there are a whole series of kings and queens throughout the Trinidad and Tobago Carnival. Stick fighting, calypso, pan, mass, all kinds of kings and queens. And those things used to be chosen by the people for the people, and they constituted an annual royalty of kings and queens, a kingdom that was constituted by these creative geniuses that would give people a cipher, a kind of prophecy, a kind of map of the way forward and how to move. But then the judges started distorting who would win and those kinds of things, and thwarting the will of the people, but also shaping the festival because there were huge money prizes. And so people started to write and create based on what they thought the judges liked. And that resulted in 1974, which is considered a tragic year, when Shadow with the bassman was supposed to win the Calypso crown. Everybody knew it, and they gave the crown to one of the older monarchs. And that didn't just thwart Shadow. What it did, it thwarted the generational succession that was supposed to have happened in the music. And Trinidad's music started to collapse after that. Reggae took over the year after, the very, very year after, 1975, and has continued that primacy since then, and that's because of stuff that the judges do. And finally, in the first part here, we come to the panels where we talk about the kings and queens themselves and all the kings and queens of the past, and we see those. I mean, I'm talking about all bands have kings and queens, right? But there's the competition kings and queens, and this talks about the competition kings and queens. And you see there, that first image is an image of a costume called Beauty in Perpetuity, right? An artist, recognition, the artist is me, of Beauty in Perpetuity by Terry Evelyn from a George Bailey band, of Gods and Clowns, Bats and Clowns. And it's considered the most beautiful costume of all time. And the thing is, in that first year, in 1963, in the first King and Queen competition, the people voted it Individual of the Year, not the judges. So you see from the very beginning the difference part between the people and the judges, right? And these are a full list of all the kings and queens from 1963 to the present, the last competition in 2020, right? And you see some of the great costumes of all time, Splendoria, by Geraldo Vera, you know. Right, so we're walking now. See the Anglican Cathedral is in the background, and see that's one of the portals there glistening, right? And I'll talk a bit about the portals. Here's another one, but this is not a portal of regeneration. This is a portal representing what happens, right? It's a portal of kind of decay, destruction, and death. So we're trying to bind those forces of collapse and decay, right? And now we talk about the fact of the destruction, right opposite the image of death. We talking about the reason why 99% of the costumes are destroyed in Trinidad and Tobago Carnival, and we have no record of some of the genius things that we've done. Part of it is because, as First Peoples, Africans, East Indians, Native Americans, we destroy ritual artifacts after use. But that works only in a society where the entire society is working, all the skills are being passed down by guilds and secret societies and those kinds of things. But in a society like this, which has left out all our indigenous arts out of primary, secondary, and tertiary level education systems, out of institutions, out of media, out of curricula, out of the words and utterances of leadership, we have to keep our artifacts to be able to use them to pass on skill. Whilst this actual exhibition of kings and queens were put together, I got a call that said one of the last costumes made by one of the great artisans of the golden age was being destroyed, and that's this costume, part of this reassembling of parts of the costume that were thrown away by the late great Stephen Derrick. You can see, I think it's Uzuli or Dambala. It is the snake god, African snake goddess, Uzuli Dambala, and you can see there this incredible costume was in a rubbish heap, and I had to go and rescue it from the garbage. Right, so we talk about that phenomena, and that's the reason why we have these portals, which are about the reconstitution of Trinidad and Tobago's heritage, and those kinds of things. Right, gonna walk us now through so we're walking through really picturesque, very, very picturesque sirens in the background, ambulances. Really beautiful Woodford Square, which is a shame that more people, because of the violence and the communities and that kind of stuff, people don't come down here, and we're trying to get people to come back to the city center. But here's one of the portals. It's tied to a tree, and here's one of the portals, and where we talking about the regeneration through these portals of costumes, the 100 greatest costumes of all time. Walking through beautiful canopy, coming up onto another portal. So these are all octagons, 8-sided, with tape. In the center is a fragment of a costume, and all of them have this sign that says, reassemble the fragments, rebuild the kings and queens, build the Carnival and Steel Band Museum. Right? Reassemble the fragments, rebuild the kings and queens, build the Carnival and Steel Band Museum. And in the center you have the fragments. Right? So this is what this exhibition is about. We're coming to one of the edges of the entrances by this magnificent building that was created by Colin Laird, one of the great architects of Trinidad and Tobago, our civic architect who built the National Stadium, the Promenade, Queen's Hall, and this incredible building, the National Library, which is behind a heritage building, the old fire station. Incredible. Behind it you could see the Twin Towers, financial towers, Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Finance, and those things. And there you have this incredible white building there by Colin Laird. And then of course we have the seat of Parliament, the Red House of Trinidad and Tobago, where the people's business is supposed to be done and conducted by the politicians. Behind me, another set of panels. These panels talk about the Mokojumbi tradition, and Mokojumbis are now, there have been four kings and queens in Mokojumbi kings and queens. The Mokojumbis, the stilt walkers that came from West Africa, that was an extinct traditional mass tradition about 30-something years ago, about 40-something years ago, and was brought back by two men, Moose and Dragon, but especially a man called Dragon, Glenn Dragon D'Souza, from Kilimanjaro Mokojumbis, who brought back and revitalized the Mokojumbi tradition and brought it back, not just here in Trinidad, but in the world. Right? Glenn Dragon D'Souza. And these panels talk about the rise of the Mokojumbis from extinction and being brought back to Sesame Street and Grover walking stilts and international photographic book on the desk of most of the big celebrities in the world. This next set of stuff here, this is for one of the traditional mass champions, Winston Daniel, who does Beast and Devil Mask and Dragon Mask. And we just thought that we would put we would juxtapose the heads, his excellently sculpted heads of dragons and devils next to the red house because right, we have images of the devil, Satan, and Beelzebub and his whole crew against the backdrop of the red house, right? There he is, Satan himself, and yeah, and so you're inside a field of devils, of floating devil heads, right, opposite of the red house. See how exquisitely crafted the heads are, papier-mâché heads by champion Winston Daniel, right? So you get an idea of what the exhibition is about. Little later on today, from 11 to 4, at the conclusion, we have the ritual, and then we have costumes dancing, kings and queens, junior and adult kings and queens dancing. Right, here's yet another portal. Rebuild the kings and queens. Build the Carnival and Steel Band Museum. Right? We're coming out to yet another portal. 2 portals. You can see them here. And we're coming up to two more things here that with examples of the history of the king and queen tradition. This one is about giving thanks, and it's talking about the tribe of people. It takes a village to make mass, and the first village that we have to pay thanks to is East Port of Spain, which are the hills in that direction. Laventille, Belmont, Mova, Gonzales. These are the people who midwife the Holy Trinity of Pan, Mass, Calypso into existence, and we have never given that community thanks. You know, the gang boys of those that space converted themselves into secret society guilds of master artisans and created Pan, Mass, and Calypso. Businessmen, they became businessmen, inventors, musicians, some of the greatest writers of the English language, some of the greatest artisans and stuff in the world, creating the kings and queens and so many other things. 300 Trinidad style carnivals emanated from that community with $15 billion every year. The 2 largest street festivals on the Western world were London, Notting Hill, and Brooklyn, New York carnivals are both Trinidad style carnivals, and at their height they had each 4 million people on the streets. 4 million people, mostly black people, where in any one of those cities, if 3 black people get together, it's cause for police action. And Trinidad and Tobago have 4 million people on the street, mostly black, and that is power. And it was no private sector or public sector did that. That's people power, right? So we talk about that tribe and village, that not just East Port of Spain, but we talk about the tribe that makes every single band and every king and queen work, from the band leaders like the great Stephen Lee Young, to the great people who wear the kings and queens, because Trinidad has this extraordinary affection for the people who wear the king and queen costumes. So people like Hilton Cox and Alison Brown, Piola Marchand, Rosemary Kuruk Jagasa have an extraordinary kind of relationship with the population because they wore these costumes. And we talk about that. We talk about the designers who get really short shrift and this stuff because people are so hooked on the band leaders and the people who wear. And then we talk about the photographers, the late great Noel Norton, without whom we would not have images of a lot of the costumes pre-1980. Then we get into detail, and there was going to be a whole set of panels going into, we were supposed to have 16 panels. We didn't finish enough on time. We missed the panels on McFarlane, K2K, the great Peter Minshall, Barclay, Carlisle Chang, a whole slew of others. But this is Pantheon number 1. There's going to be Pantheon number 2, and then by Pantheon number 2 we'd have those. But we did be able to give some space to some of the get closer to some of the people that people might just hear their names, but they don't know much about them. The late great Roland St. George was one of the 3 people when you say Carnival Kings. Him and the Eustaces and Peter Samuel, those are the 3 kind of names that resonate in people's heads when you talk about Carnival Kings. But we're able to give him his due, and he has the history of the most second places in the competition. But these are some of the greatest costumes. Some of them you can't imagine. Some of them, some of them that came 8th and 7th and that kind of stuff. You want to know, like, but what beat that? You know what I mean? And we go back to the judges, of course, right? And then we talk about the Jagassar family, who gave us a lot of the costumes that you're about to see. You see some of the bigger ones coming up there, and the whole Roller family and their thing about the East Indian, San Fernando, fancy Indian tradition of big band masks with massive kings and queens, super adorned Native American gods and goddesses and figures from their mythology and that kind of stuff. And the San Fernando has preserved the fancy Indian, that's the Native American kind of mask, and thanks to them that tradition is still alive. Here's another portal. Reassemble the fragments, rebuild the kings and queens. And there's the image. These are fragments, and we're asking for the rebuilding of those things. So these are magical kinds of portals that are meant to do that. Yeah. So moving on, we're almost close to the end of the exhibition now. I'm walking you through the last bits here, and here is one of the largest fragments that we have, and this is one of the Jagassar's costumes, again from that tradition of fancy Indian San Fernando masks. Guardian of the Horned Serpent by Karina Badal, and from the Ban and Tame territory in 2020, and built by Lionel Jagassar, designed by Lionel Jagassar. Right, so you could get, just from this small fragment, you could get a sense of, imagine this was 4 times that size in terms of height and width and all of that, depth and that kind of stuff. Those are the kinds of costumes that are part of the tradition. We're going over. We're going to see some more fragments, and we're going to see some more of the panels that exist. Here's another panel, and this one talks about the competition itself, and then also about the costumes that are on the road for Carnival. Right, so there are lots of pictures in this one, right? And we talk about the road, right? It's one thing about being on the Savannah stage and then judges judge, but the other thing is the costume is not the costume unless it go to the road. They have costumes that only compete on the Savannah stage and they don't go on the road. That is blasphemy. You have to go on the road, right? You're leading bands and you're going on the street. And check out the phenomenal kinds of variety and the diversity of the kinds of individuals and kings and queens that exist. We talk about, priestesses, gods, goddesses, mountain ranges, right? And these are like from the 2017, 2018 competitions, that Damien looked at images. And these are some images I took of this guy who creates his own individual king for his band of one. And I say that is the spirit of Carnival itself. That is what Carnival is all about. And right around the corner, we talk about the Carnival and Steel Band Museum. That first image that we saw, one of the first images that we saw of Terry Evelyn, he designed the first plans for the Carnival and Steel Band Museum. Real futuristic stuff incredible visionary individual. That's why he was the first People's Choice. And this whole panel is about the Heritage Warehouse, the Carnival and Steel Band Museum, and the Guild of Masters, which is supposed to be at the heart of that institution to rebuild the 100 greatest kings of queens. So again, because what we're about, rebuilding the 100 greatest kings and queens. That's what we're about, rebuilding the 100 greatest kings and queens, right? And here we have the Junior King of Carnival, and this is where I'm going to leave you. Here, the Junior King of Carnival. Here, Pride of Place in the tent, and his little brother's mask, which I think placed second in one of the other junior competitions. But the Junior King of Carnival, and that is, I don't know if you got a good glimpse of it. Yeah, there he is, the Junior King. Both costumes will be dancing today, right? So thanks a lot, guys, for being. Oh wow! How could I forget the most important portal of them all? We created 12 plinths with 12 of the greatest costumes, of the 100 greatest costumes of all time, and we built this plinth, this portal, where you could see these costumes on, and this is where we're going to conduct the big ritual later on today. We are going to create a ritual here later on today where we are going to invoke the 100 greatest costumes of all time. We're going to invoke them, and we're going to call them down so they begin reassembling and reconstituting themselves here in Trinidad and Tobago. And we're going to invoke the creation of the Carnival and Steel Band Museum. Magic thing, ritual thing. We're going to do that. That's what it's all about. So again, I want to thank you all from me and the team, myself, Kirk Langton, Lawrence Richardson, Reese, our sponsors, Gregory Abood, from Jimmy Abood, Coffee Pear in Canada, Blue Waters, the other sponsors who with us, Bermudez, the ones who risked and gave, there were others we approached, but they didn't come true, right? And the artisans who gave up their costumes, and the band leaders and stuff who gave up their costumes and stuff. We really, really love you. We appreciate you. We appreciate all the creators of Carnival content. We appreciate all those things, and that's what we're all about. And that's why this thing exists. So thanks again, and we love you all. And over and out. Rubadiri Victor from the Artists Coalition of Trinidad and Tobago.